Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Sunny Vanderstar. Today's topic is using ancient knowledge to restore today's forest. And our presenters today are our expedition leader, Elder Brandão, and his associate, Murilo, Frasão, Brandino. So welcome, guys. I hope I didn't butcher your name too much, Murilo. We're so happy to have you here today, and looking forward to hearing all your great information. So I know you've got a lot to say. I'm going to turn it right over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much all for being here. Thank you, Murilo, as well. So, well, talking the language of the forest. How about we start with that, right, Murilo? Now we will talk about the knowledge of ancient people producing food in a forest system that increases diversity of food, using less water, protecting natural resources, and creating super fertile soil. So I mean wisdom of ancient people helping nature to produce food faster, better, healthier, and in a sustainable way, right? So talking the language of forest. I just love this idea. And for that, I brought Murilo, a great friend I had the privilege to work with. Murilo is a biologist that I have met at Caiman Lodge, where I lived for 10 years, and a ranch in the Pantanal that is a driving force of ecotourism, sustainability, and cattle ranching and conservation, right? So Murilo has a vast experience on ecology and permaculture, also sustainability, and he is the agroforestry coordinator at the ranch. So now he will tell us a lot about agroforestry, ecological principles, right, for farming techniques, and his experience at this incredible destination in the Pantanal. So we will try an effort of hearing well. His mic is not really great, right, Murilo? But I think we're doing fine. So Murilo, the mic is with you.
Thank you, Elder. Thank you, everyone, to be here. It's a pleasure. I'm very happy to share some of my experience and my dedication for the past year here at Caiman Ecological Refuge. And it's about 5 years now that I've been dedicating my life to understand soil life and plant life, and how we can implement some ecological principles towards agriculture for food production. So we're talking about food security, we're talking about food production, but also we're talking about ecosystem restoration, forest restoration, regenerative agriculture. All right? So as Albert previously mentioned, I am working at Caiman Ecological Refuge, and I am the agroforestry coordinator, but I don't work alone. I am here with Adam, hands-on the field, and also we have our environmental manager with us, which is Julia Nogueira, and we are working together to deliver food and goods, fruit and veggies for our hotel kitchen and also our workers' village cafeteria. Okay, aside from this, we also work with composting, and all the organic residue from the hotel and the workers' village are being managed on our compost bins, and we also have a side work, side hustle with the native bees conservation. So we are also managing bees.
That looks perfect. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I really appreciate you sticking around. I think we're going to figure this out.
Okay. So, well, unfortunately, Murilo could not really go on with the presentation. The webinar, the internet is not really great in his side. But the idea here is how this can be done. I mean, this is what I most find interesting, to produce food with this ancient knowledge, right? So the next slide here is about dark earth. So there are a lot of places in Amazon and actually around the world, but we brought here an example of Amazon that ancient people living in Amazon actually produce this kind of soil. To the left, you can see a regular soil from the Amazon, but to the right, you see a very rich, fertile soil. And because the management of the land was made by these people. So let me show you here in the next slide. All these red dots is where people had found those civilization living at. So in those places, those were villages, if you can say that, people living there, so indigenous people, and they would apply all the agroforest principles to produce food and then have this kind of results for the soil, right? So that's really interesting. It's really rich. Well, the principles of agroforest, the soil coverage, we will show you here some of the pictures. Biodiversity, right? So you can actually have a lot of species in the same place, right? It's not like monoculture as we are used to be, you're used to deal with, right? High density, so you have a lot of species together, not just a lot of species, but a high density of them. And then another principle is the ecological succession. So in each month or each year, you have a different kind of food production. I will show here also with some pictures. And stratification. So different layers, you can have different species. And then nutrient cycling, which we may mean as life poses, and I will explain why. So first of all, soil coverage. That is the main key for agroforest system. So as you can see in the picture, you got some papaya trees, and then other small species underground there, but all the soil is covered. You don't see the sand or the soil outside, right? So this maintains a lot of things there, maintains the water, and attracts a lot of beings, if I can say, bacteria, insects, and so on. And this is really important for producing food. So people that work with agroforest would say that if you have soil, just bare soil, you have a scar on your production, right? So soil coverage is one of the most important things. It can save up to 70% of water if you compare with a regular production, right? And then diversity and density. So you can see a lot of species here, right? Bananas, and you can see other species in the low ground there, and you can see papaya. You see some leaves like lettuce in the back, and little onions in the front, right? So diversity, you don't have like in soybeans monoculture. So this is one of the most important things too, because each plant, each species has a different purpose, helping the whole system to be healthier and to be sustainable, as I will explain later. And now, natural or ecological succession. So as you can see, from left to right, it's a kind of a timeline. So in the beginning, you start with algae, and then some fungus or some bacteria. And then you got some grass going on, and then humidity goes up. And then you got some bushes. And then after that, you got some more biodiversity. So tall bushes, and then later some wood, and so on. And as you can see, the accumulation, the number of species is going higher, and the abundance is going higher to the right, right? This is natural in a agroforest, right? So come again, this is a different picture, but that shows the blue line there is exactly the one that I just showed you in the previous slide. But then this represents the yellow line there, the yellow arrow represents how we usually do, how we minimize species, number of species, diversity, how we take it off everything and manage just one species of plant. So would be a monoculture. But then this brings a lot of bad things to the environment. For example, using a lot of water and then taking out of the soil all the nutrients until a time that the red arrow shows you cannot really produce anything more, right? So we are just destroying the whole soil. Where is the really richness of Earth, right? Well, let's again see the next slide. Stratification, another special principle of agroforest. The picture here shows how it is in numbers to the left, but let me explain. The tallest one, which is the canopy strata or a layer, it would be just a few species. For example, the really high trees, and they just take 20% of all the light from the sun, right, on that layer. So you would just use in the agroforest system like 5 number, right, 5 individuals of this big tall tree. And then if you compare with a really short one, the low layer, you would have grass, for example, or lettuce. And that species would take 100% of the light at that layer, right? So you can start to have an idea how a forest manage its light coming from the sun, right? So this is important. And of course, I'm not going in too much details, just to explain in a simple way. And now the example of Caiman Lodge, right? We got in the center west of Brazil, this is the agroforest of Caiman, and in the red triangle. And let me show you here. This is a nice picture where it started actually. So this was a very old citrus orchard and very old. So we had to reset the whole thing. So here we managed the soil. We took it out a lot of trees, actually, a lot of the citrus that were really old, it cannot really produce too much. And then 6 months after the implantation, so we manage the soil and start to produce, as you can see, in lines, right? In lines. I will explain why. 13 months, so 1 year after the implementation, look how much of the plants we have there, right? So it changed completely the scenery, right? After 15 months, right, you can get a better quality actually picture. And in mention, we have a lot of water actually to produce the system, even though it saves a lot of water. And then 19 months after the implementation. So we started in 2019, right? And then 25 months after the implementation. So you see how different it was. But now let's try to show you a little bit on the field instead of aerial view, right? So here, this is the beginning. To the left, you can see how we manage the soil in a different way. One example is putting a lot of large pieces of wood, right? And after that, we covered with dry leaves. And this is a key for, as I mentioned, for agroforest to work. So everything you're seeing there, it's creating the right conditions to attract animals. For example, bacteria, insects, earthworms, which is really important, instead of attracting termites, for example, right? So the termites would come if that piece of wood would be like that, just exposed like that. But when we covered with dry leaves, this changes completely. And this starts to compost. And the most important thing is not the compost itself, but what is going on while composting, right? So everything is alive there. As another picture there, after putting the dry leaves, you start to plant in each line and between the lines. You put the irrigation system and you continue, right? So this is, as I said, as a picture you saw, 6 months later after the implementation, sorry. And now, as you can see, the first month, right, of the lines, you can see some lettuce and other vegetables growing there, and very low. The stratification now is very low, even though we already plant on that picture bananas, eucalyptus, papayas. So they are growing, but of course takes a while. And then in the first months, you start to collect the green leaves, right? So lettuce and rucola, for example. 3 months later, bananas were up together with the corn, right? So you start to see some other species coming up. And then 1 year after the implementation, and then a picture of 1 year as well, right? So you can see the bananas growing high now. They're not producing banana, not yet, but you can start to see eucalyptus, and then eggplants, papayas, and a lot of flowers as well to fulfill another goal, to attract insects. So this agroforest combines a lot of things, right? It's not a monoculture producing one kind of vegetable, and then you try to expel everybody else. No, this is you're bringing everybody in, right? So then, food production, how about that? This is one example of food being produced on the agroforest. Look how many types and how much of each vegetable we have there, right? And the production by year, right? We got in the first year a ton of food. The next year, almost 3 tons. And in 2021, it was actually 5 tons. But this number we got just for the half year, sorry. He didn't put the next ones that produce until December. But I mean, it was incredible, quite incredible, right? The number he showed here. And then you compare, right, how it was producing the first 3 years, which was in in green, and then the second year in blue, and then the third year until July, the production. Look how fast it was, and especially because Murilo was working in the last 2 years there, and this start to go higher and higher. Well, the real products, right? So we are producing a lot of bananas, as you can see there, and banana has a very important goal for agroforest because it nurtures other species. You prune, you cut the leaves while the plant is growing, and especially after giving the bananas, you cut the whole thing off, you cut the whole thing down. And this is amazing because what we learned that we shouldn't destroy well the system, but this is the thing. When you prune, when you take some species out of the way after producing, it just gives the information to the system that it's time to renew, to rejuvenate, instead of telling the system that we are getting old, right? So this is very interesting, right? Look how much bananas one time it produced. And then another example of managing the organic matter, right? So the top picture there, it shows how the bananas were and other species as well. And the second picture below there shows how it was cut it off, some of the leaves or some of the whole plants out of the system to, again, inform the system that it's time to rejuvenate, right? So it is outstanding. It's human helping nature to produce faster and better, right? And in a sustainable way. So another example of managing organic matter, one picture to the left, and then after the pruning, after the cutting off of the pieces of the plants, and then the system is getting back on track to produce more. And then you can decide if you will produce more of these species or more of that species, including wood. Yeah, this is very interesting. You can include wood to produce wood, of course, after a few years. Well, another example here, 3 pictures, and then 2 months later, the last picture there. So the first picture showing a lot of plants there, and then you start to cut off. You see the remains of the plants in the bottom there in the second picture, and then 2 months later, producing again. So you see how the system grows again and fast, right? Again, now, but a different example, soil coverage, a different example of management. So the soil exposed now, and then start to put some dry leaves on the soil with the irrigation system and so on, and then a few months later, corn being produced in the same spot there. And then eggplants, as you can see in the left, you can see some eggplants, and then in the middle picture, people managing the line there. And then again, how it was in the beginning, in the beginning, planting again the lines there of eggplants. So you see how you can start to produce, end a cycle, and then start a new one. Right? So leaf green polyculture, as you can see there, you can get in April, a few days later, and then in May. So kind of in 20 days, a little bit less, you get this growing quite fast, right? Well, and then of course, Murilo was not here with us saying the half of the presentation, but he brought here a very interesting concept that changes a lot what we think about food production. So the author there says the ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, right, but the cultivation and the perfection of human beings. So it's just connected to how we can be alive here on the planet Earth, but also respecting some limits of the planet and being really close together, connecting to producing food in a sustainable way. I mean, this is one of the most interesting things for me that really connected me with agroforestry system, and it changes completely how we could produce food in the world. I'm not saying that monoculture will not exist in the future. I'm just saying that we can include those principles in producing food in the world. So that can change how we exploit the planet. Instead of exploiting the planet, we would live with the planet, and then letting the planet live together as well, right, in a sustainable and healthy way. So I think I would like to thank you all for being here. I hope you understand how Wi-Fi connection can be kind of a bad in some places, especially when it's raining in the Pantanal, which we are really almost praying actually to receive some rain, because Pantanal is really dry now, when actually should be full of water. And I'm talking about southern Pantanal, exactly where Caiman Ecological Refuge is. And I was there last week, and it was really dry. So Murilo, if you're hearing me, thank you very much. I'm sorry for the Wi-Fi connection, and I hope people have easy questions, so I can answer and do what Murilo would do, right? So thank you again.
Elder, you did an amazing job jumping in there. Thank you so much for saving the day. That was fascinating.
Thank you.
And very impressive that you were able to just do that on the fly. I'll try to pick some relatively easy questions, but none of them actually look easy. This is an interesting one. It didn't occur to me, but could you talk about the decision to include non-native species such as eucalyptus in the food forest? Is there a special reason for doing that you're aware of?
A special reason to include eucalyptus, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The
One special reason.
and I don't know if this is true, but the assumption from this guest is that it's non-native. Yes. And why would you use a non-native species?
Exactly. This is a great question, and I think I can answer. The thing is, when you add even a not native species, it has a goal. And the goal of eucalyptus, for example, is to give to the system what it needs. For example, soil cover. So when the eucalyptus is growing, you will cut the leaves, and this is not bad for the eucalyptus or to the system. You start to cut the leaves while it's growing, and then you add these leaves to the soil, together with other species as well. And eucalyptus, it has that kind of goal because it grows fast and produces a lot of leaves, right? So that is really important. That adds speed to the system and completes the goal of the system to have a soil coverage, right? So, and also people would think, eucalyptus drains a lot of water from the soil, but not really. Just not all the species. There's a lot of species of eucalyptus, right? And some of them, they don't have that kind of issue that drains a lot, takes a lot of water from the soil. So that is the species that is used here in Brazil for all the agroforest system.
Very interesting. Okay. Yeah. How do you distribute or sell what you produce?
Well, especially for Caiman Ecological Refuge, they produce to themselves. So all this agroforest produce food for the village, so people working and living there, but also to the lodge. So guests eat everything that is produced on the system. So it is fantastic. Of course, there's a lot of agroforest system in Brazil, and some of them are built to be commercial. So they sell to other places, actually to sell to cities. But in the case of Caiman Lodge, in the case of Caiman Refuge, is not to produce, to sell, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. I think I have one more question for you. Cool. Can you estimate the number of years that it took for the soil to become dark and rich rather than that yellowy color?
Sure. I mean, this is a very interesting question because it put years and years. I mean, that kind of deepness. I mean, it can be, let me see, like 3 meters or like 15 feet, right? Or more, 15 feet. That is just over 1, 2, or 3,000 years. I mean, this is too much. But imagine so many people doing that in so many places. I mean, this is incredible. And in an agroforest system, as in Caiman Lodge, the goal is not that. The goal is not to reproduce really deep, fertile soil. Of course, it will produce, but not as huge as in Amazon. Because here you will change your agroforest, you will change your system according to your will. Oh, this year I want to produce that, but 5 years from now I want to start to produce wood. So I will change the system to produce wood in 5 years. Okay, after 10 years, I change it again. I want to produce lettuce and other leaf green things. So you can manage that. And of course, this changing probably will not produce in, for example, 20 years, 10 feet of deepness of fertile soil like that. So I hope I answered the question.
I think you did. I have one more. I'm going to sneak one more in.
Sure.
Is any fertilizer used?
Not at all. When you start an area like you started in Cayman Lodge in 2019, you need to manage the soil for the first time. So you need to add a few things like salt, different mineral salts, and then you can try to change the pH, but that's it. After you start to manage just that, and then you start to produce the few leaves, and then start to come eggplants, and then corn. Of course, you will manage, and some insects will come, and then you will not use pesticides. You will not use fertilizers. The whole system is managed to be independent, right? So this is the key thing. You eat very healthy food without pesticides, and you don't need to bring things way away from where you're producing food. Example, fertilizers. So the thing is, you can produce food in a small area with a very rich diet, right? And you don't really need to buy things on the shop, right? Until a time that you don't even need to buy seeds. You produce seeds right there. So that's some of the principles of agroforestry.
It's truly a fascinating topic, and really appreciate you bringing this to us. Murilo, thank you so much for putting this presentation together. I'm so sorry that the internet gods were not with us today and we couldn't see and hear you share your I'm sure, very personal work. But Elder, thank you so much for stepping in. You really did save the day, and hopefully we'll do a little more of this. It truly is a great topic, and kind of a neat break from wildlife. So I'm going to just turn it over to you for any last closing comments.
Okay, thank you again, Murilo. I'm so sorry we planned this, right? To share and to talk. We would talk a lot in the presentation, and we were together a few days ago, just finishing the whole thing. And I'm sorry you didn't hear Murilo's voice quite well, because the passion is in his words. And actually, the agroforestry system principles are very natural in his speech, which is a little bit different from me. I don't work with that every day. So, but I hope I could help, and maybe we'll do again, Murilo, together. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Sunny. See you in the next webinar.
It is always a pleasure to see you and hear what you have to share with us. I want to thank everybody for sticking around today and being patient through this technical stuff that we have to deal with every now and then. Please do join us again tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I'll conclude the webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.